All right, so get this. We're diving into Alice in Wonderland for this deep dive. But hold on, it's not just about, tea parties and talking rabbits. We're like getting philosophical,
Oh,
exploring those surprising connections between Carroll's like whimsical tales and some seriously big ideas.
yeah, it's really amazing how a children's book can be this gateway to like profound philosophical questions.
Yeah.
You've provided some really fascinating excerpts from Alice in Wonderland and Philosophy, curiouser and curiouser, and I have a feeling this is going to be a wild ride.
You said it. Just like skimming through these writings, I was surprised to learn that Alice in Wonderland was a favorite of, wait for it, Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher.
Wow.
Apparently, he was like captivated by how Carroll played with language and meaning. I guess even philosophers can't resist a good trip down the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, right.
Speaking of which, this chapter, Unruly Alice, really caught my eye. It it actually argues that Alice is, get this, a feminist icon.
What's so fascinating here is how Carroll, whether intentionally or not, uses the absurdity of Wonderland to kind of critique those societal norms. And the chapter really highlights Alice's independent spirit, that she's constantly challenging expectations, particularly those placed on, like, young girls.
It's true. She like totally pushes back against that traditional housewife role. Like when she encounters the pigeon and the Duchess, she doesn't exactly gush over their, shall we say, unconventional parenting style.
Right, and neither of them fit that mold of, a nurturing maternal figure.
Yeah.
And Alice sees right through their facade. It really challenges this idealized image of women as, inherently domestic and motherly.
Yeah, she's not falling for their nonsense, that's for sure.
No.
And she's all about taking charge. This isn't some damsel in distress story, which, come to think of it, that like plays into the whole questioning authority thing, right? Even when it's like someone as powerful as, the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah, and that questioning is, like, key to the philosophical depth of Alice. Take the chapter, 6 Impossible Things Before Breakfast. It connects Alice's encounters with the absurd to those logical fallacies we see every day.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. The Mad Hatter's Two Party, right? The chapter argues that those nonsensical conversations actually mirror real-life bad arguments. Like, whoa.
Exactly. It's like Carroll is holding up this distorted mirror to our own reasoning. For example, the Mad Hatter declares, it's always tea time. Just because he repeats it, it doesn't, like, logically,
Make it true.
yeah, make it true.
Whoa! I've totally been in those arguments where someone tries to pull that kind of logic. It's giving me this whole new perspective on those, like, frustrating conversations.
And that's the beauty of recognizing these fallacies in a kind of fantastical context. We become so much more aware of them in, everyday life.
So we can thank Alice for helping us spot a bad argument. Mind blown. But speaking of mind blowing, let's talk about the chapter, How Deep Does the Rabbit Hole Go? Comparing Alice's journey to the Matrix. Now that's trippy.
It is a mind-bending parallel, right? Both Alice and Neo go on these journeys that make them question the very fabric of reality.
Seriously. Even as a kid, that drink me potion always struck me as like more than just a silly shrinking potion. It felt, I don't know, significant.
And it is. This chapter connects those moments to the philosophical idea of solipsism. Like, imagine if Alice was dreaming and Wonderland was all in her head. And that's what solipsism asks, can we be sure anything exists outside our own minds?
Okay, now that's a serious mind bender. It makes you wonder what's real, even outside of Wonderland.
Exactly. And those are the questions philosophers have been grappling with for, like, centuries. And it's something that, we see Alice struggle with throughout her adventures. Remember her constantly asking, who in the world am I? It's like she's on this quest for identity, but her experiences just keep changing her.
And she keeps forgetting things. It's like her memories are as fluid as her size, which reminds me of this chapter, Memory and Muchness. It dives into how Alice's identity struggles actually link to these philosophical theories of memory and the self.
And this is where things get even more interesting. If our memories shape who we are, what happens when those memories are unreliable or even, vanish? It makes you question the very foundation of personal identity.
It's like that classic question, right? If a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, did it really happen? Only this time it's like Alice's memories shaping her reality.
Precisely. And the source material even connects us back to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, Just like those nonsensical conversations, our memories can distort our sense of self, making us question, like, who we really are.
Yeah. So it's not just Wonderland that's full of illusions and shifting realities. Our own minds can play tricks on us, too. I'm starting to feel like I need a reality check.
Well, remember those excerpts you shared about nuclear strategists?
Yeah.
The way they use language, it's like creating their own wonderland of justifications. It's fascinating how these, like, seemingly different topics, children's literature and then the nuclear strategy, they kind of intersect through this lens of language and logic.
Wait, are you saying that reading Alice in Wonderland can help us understand the minds of nuclear strategists? Now, that's a connection I didn't see coming.
It's all about the language games people play. Remember the chapter, Nuclear Strategists in Wonderland? It argues that some strategists use language too, like distort reality, much like the nonsensical conversations in Wonderland.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's like when they refer to atomic bombs as devices, right? It all sounds, well, harmless when you put it that way.
Exactly. The author draws this parallel between that nonsensical language in Wonderland and how some strategists use, like, euphemisms and jargon to almost distance themselves from those real-world consequences of nuclear war. It's a way of creating their own wonderland where logic and reason are kind of twisted to fit their agendas.
It's chilling to think about. Like, they're so caught up in their own, like, mad tea party of nuclear strategy that they lose sight of the, the real human cost.
Yeah, the source material even mentions Ludwig Wittgenstein again.
Oh, right.
Specifically, his concept of language games.
Okay.
The author argues that some strategists are playing a dangerous language game, one with, potentially catastrophic consequences.
That reminds me of the chapter Nuclear Etiquette. It describes how strategists use, like, riddles and coded language to justify their positions. It's like, it makes it feel like a game.
And that's where the comparison to Wonderland becomes so powerful. Remember the Mad Hatter's riddle, why is a raven like a writing desk?
Right.
In Wonderland, it's just a nonsensical game. But when nuclear strategists use similar tactics to, like, justify the unthinkable, the stakes are incredibly high.
It's a sobering reminder that language can be a powerful tool for manipulation. And just like in Wonderland, where consequences are often absurd, these strategists seem to operate in this world, like, detached from reality. But we can't just brush it off as nonsense, can we?
Absolutely not. The author argues that we need to be aware of these linguistic games, especially when it comes to issues of, war and peace. We can't just be passive observers in this game. We have to be prepared to question the rules.
Yeah.
And challenge the players.
Yeah, it's like we need to borrow Alice's looking glass to see through their, distorted reality. But how do we even do that when, like, the stakes are so high it can feel, I don't know, overwhelming?
And that's where the chapter, You're Nothing But a Pack of Cards, Alice Doesn't Have a Social Contract, comes in.
Oh, okay.
It connects Alice's kind of rebellion against the queen to this idea of a social contract, that unspoken agreement we make to follow society's rules.
Right. Like how we all agree to pay taxes in exchange for, roads and schools. But Alice didn't sign up for any of Wonderland's craziness.
Exactly. She never consented to their authority.
Why?
The author argues that this makes her outburst at the trial, you're nothing but a pack of cards, even more significant. It's a total rejection of their system.
Yeah, she's not just, like, questioning the queen at that point, right? It's like she's questioning this whole idea of blindly following rules, especially when they're used to, like, justify the absurd, which honestly feels pretty relevant when we think about those nuclear strategists and their, distorted language games.
It is a powerful connection. Just like Alice, we have the power to question, to challenge, and to, refuse to play by rules that don't make sense. We don't have to accept their version of reality.
Wow. This deep dive has been quite a journey, from tea parties and talking rabbits to nuclear strategists and, like, philosophical quandaries. Who knew Alice in Wonderland could be so, I don't know, thought-provoking?
It's amazing how these seemingly, disparate worlds, children's literature, philosophy, nuclear strategy, they all kind of intersect through this lens of language, logic, and, that power of questioning.
It really highlights the importance of critical thinking, doesn't it? Especially in a world that's, like, saturated with information and often, misleading narratives.
Absolutely.
So for our listener who just went down this rabbit hole with us, what's the key takeaway? What do you hope they'll kind of ponder?
I'd say embrace your inner Alice. Cultivate that curiosity, that willingness to question, and never be afraid to challenge the absurd, no matter how, powerful the source. Just like Alice, we have the power to shape our own realities.
And on that note, I think we've earned ourselves a slice of cake. A good long think. Thanks for joining us on this mind-bending deep dive.